Hello, welcome to B2B Revenue Leaders. I'm your host, Dustin. And on this episode, I'm joined by Talia Wolf, who is the founder and CEO of Getuplift. And we're talking about how the main lever in conversion optimization isn't changing the color of your CTA button. Instead, it's focusing on leveraging emotion. We also touch on why B2B messaging is broken, how AI can be a nice assistant, but just isn't going to nail the emotional piece of copywriting, and a whole lot more. On to the episode. Hey, Talia, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, thanks for joining me. So we're going to talk about a whole bunch of things, specifically around using emotion in copy, a little bit around conversion optimization, what AI can and can't do when it comes to both those things. So to start off, though, maybe let's talk about the emotion side, because when people think high converting websites, might not be the first thing they think of. So maybe just unpack a little bit of why that's so important and why people should focus on it.
Yeah, so I run a conversion optimization agency, and when I first got started, I used to think that conversion optimization was about changing elements on the page. If maybe I changed the blue button to a red button, it would help, or if I were to change an image, it would help. But I very quickly understood that if I really wanted to have an impact on conversions and actually help my clients grow, I have to understand how people make decisions, how people buy online. And a big part of that was understanding B2B. How do B2B purchases happen? What is the thought process that goes through this? And what we uncovered is that emotion just drives everything. Every decision that we make in life is based on emotion. We're not rational beings. And there's a lot of different clusters of emotions that impact how we make a decision. In fact, Think of Google recently found that B2B purchasers are 8 times more likely to pay a higher price for a product that they see personal advantage. So if they think that by purchasing this product, they're going to get a promotion, or someone will view them as the go-to person in the office, or they will feel more confident about their work, they're 8 times more likely to pay a higher price for that product. So really, when we talk about emotion, the goal is understanding real intent. Why do people buy from you? And mostly when you ask companies, they will say features, it's technology, it's what's behind it, it's the actual product that we're selling, their pricing, and we don't go deep enough into the actual decision levers. So that's what we do. We think about, we do a lot of research, voice of customer research, to figure out why people actually buy from companies. And we dig into those emotions and how they're feeling right now, how they want to feel after finding a solution. And how do we then translate that into better copy, a better wireframe, better design, and test that to drive more results? So it's a long answer, but that's kind of why emotion matters.
Yeah, it's interesting, the B2B distinction there too, because I think some people get hung up on that maybe, of we're selling to a business, but it's an actual person who's buying it. So the what's in it for me thing, makes a lot of sense there. I'm curious on, it's going to vary a ton, obviously, based on the research you do in the company, but I think when a lot of people use emotions, they think from B2C using FOMO or just general kind of fear, oh, I better do this, or envy of, oh, I saw this person doing this and I thought it was great. Yeah. What are some of the common ones that come up during this research?
Over the years, we've identified 223 different emotional triggers that impact buying decisions. But I will say, I just got off stage and I did mention this. There are 2 clusters of emotion that are very common. So it's not one emotion, it's a cluster of emotions. One is self-image. Self-image is all the different emotions of how I want to feel about myself after I purchase a product. So will I feel more confident in what I do? Will I appreciate myself more? Will I value myself more? And it can be in very different things, right? Depends on B2B or B2C, but in B2B specifically, self-image is a big thing. How will I feel about myself after finding this solution? The second cluster of emotion is social image. And that's, what are other people going to think about me? How are they going to feel about me? Which kind of correlates with what Think of Google found. If I know that ultimately after signing up with this project management solution, or if I get this email marketing software, people will look at me as the go-to person in the office, or I will be revered as this guru in something. those are the different emotions that people are looking for. Like, how will I feel about myself and how will other people feel about me? And I see that mostly with B2B, as you mentioned. I think people forget there's people behind the screens, right? They think, oh, it's a building or a robot or a business, but it's not, it's actual people. And I would argue that B2B customer journeys and purchasing decisions are actually far more emotional than B2C ones.
That's an interesting take. And I think I'd probably tend to agree with that. I would think it's a longer play, though, to get those emotions through and more encompassing. Yeah. On B2C, you could run a great ad and it triggers an emotion, you click buy. Whereas in our world, you think of, actually, here's a way to take this, actually. You focus a lot on the website and the general story as well, but I'm curious, what other components do you recommend companies do to build that emotion? And I'm thinking through companies like Gong, for example, where they positioned, hey, if you know this, you're a hero and you're going to unlock all these hidden problems. And it was that was their brand across the website, social, everywhere. So how do you advise people to think through that? Or do you just work with them on the emotions and some of the copy and then give them the framework? Or what does that look like?
So we do a lot of the whole customer journey. So we're touching everything from the emails that they're sending to the landing pages they're creating. We work on navigation. So we're thinking about, okay, if these are the emotions that trigger their purchasing decision, if this is what they care about, what are the different rabbit holes and what are the different pieces of information that these people need in order to feel better about their decision and convince them to actually choose them over a competitor? So a lot of that is also navigation. Where do I actually send people? So we're A/B testing. We're running a ton of experiments on the nav bar. Where are people actually going to? Or the homepage or the pricing page? What are we saying about each pricing plan? Thinking about the different position that each pricing plan is. And also not just thinking about the design, which is of course very important and a big part of what we do, but also the message. So can someone easily understand how you specifically solve their problem? Because a lot of these companies in B2B, they're in a very competitive industry, right? You have tons of products. Even if you think about the project management solution industry, there's like dozens of these products and more or less they're doing the same. But if you're positioning your pricing plans, if you're thinking about how your specific features are serving those people with this specific problem, you're getting more personal with your prospect. So we look at the whole customer journey. We look at retention, we look at onboarding, we do a lot of experimentation. So it's constantly A/B testing stuff, whether if it's on the website or within the product or on email. And there's a lot of just constant thought about where we're sending people and are they getting the information they need and care about.
Yeah, it's really an interesting thing with, like you mentioned, project management, just to stick on that one for a bit. If I go to all their sites, a lot of their sites today currently, I couldn't tell you what the actual functional difference is. And I think that's going to get worse personally because it's just easier than ever to spin up software. Like I do demos occasionally. I cover for a sales team. I did a demo with a company with a ton of funding where AI builds the software. You just type in, this is the software I want. Here's the features. Here's the thing. You push go and it builds half of it in 15 minutes, which is a little bit terrifying. But at the same time, for those companies to stand out now, like better features isn't going to do it. You have to actually connect and have that emotional side.
And also let's remember that most of the features are the same, but if you're solving a specific problem, so we worked with Teamwork, which is a project management solution platform. And ultimately, if you were to do a quick overview, you'd think, oh, it's the same features, more or less the same pricing. But actually, we worked alongside their team to position this platform for client services. So anyone who does client work could really benefit from working with Teamwork because they have done everything within their product to position it and solve their specific problems. And that's what makes it different. Can anyone use Teamwork? Probably, and they'd probably have solved what they need. But if you do client delivery, you want to work with Teamwork because they have all the features that you need. But more than that, they're speaking your language. They know that profitability is a big issue. They know that understanding who's working on what, and actually knowing if you have the capability to take on another client is a huge thing. So everything within the messaging that we created, the comparison pages that we created, the design, every piece was a choice to show client service companies they've arrived to the right place. So I think it's a lot about just knowing who you're going for and who you're really dedicated to, and not trying to speak to everyone.
Yeah, especially as a smaller company trying to break into a space. Are you going to compete with Monday.com, who has God knows how much money, right? Teamwork's an interesting one. So I had Logan Lyles, who runs a lot of their content over there on the podcast, and he had our CEO on the Agency Life podcast that they run, which is another extension of that emotion side, right? He's getting people, client services, people run those companies on to tell their stories. So I want to transition to that side a little bit, actually, of you mentioned you do a lot of customer research, which makes complete sense here. As someone who works at a company that creates customer stories, which is related, I'm curious how you think through using those. Like, how do you then use the voice of customer, both to craft how you write the copy, but also how you think of sprinkling in customer stories or actual customer voices into it?
So I think it's a great question, because we use voice of customer research on two main ways. The first one is really going deep into ICP, because usually within B2B companies, their ICP is around age, role in the company, gender, geographical location. Maybe there's a bit of, what they're doing in the company, but there isn't a lot about who they are, their hesitations, their concerns, their challenges. A lot of the research that we do is in order to uncover that. We do a lot of visitor research and prospect research to, hey, why are you even here? What's troubling you? What's not working for you the way you're actually solving this problem right now, if you are? And then we also do a lot of customer research, which is, okay, why this product, and what does it lessen for you, and how does it make it better for you? So that helps us easily pinpoint, okay, here's why people are coming to the website. Here's the desired outcome. Like, when they come to your website, they want to know that this will happen. This is the problem you're going to solve. And now I use that to go to the website and say, but look what you're saying. Here's what you're focusing on. Here's the features that you're highlighting, or here's how you're talking about this segment or this feature, or here's how you're telling the story, and it doesn't resonate. So here's how we're going to make it better. So step one is identifying who we're speaking to on a deeper level and what they need to read, see, and feel on a page. And then auditing the actual customer journey to say, here's what's not working and why you're not getting the results you need. And then we'll also use that research to write better copy, to create new landing pages, to write emails, to run experiments. Sometimes it will be a huge, big idea of, you know what, the whole funnel needs to change, and we shouldn't be sending people to this page. We should be sending them here, and here we'll map the whole thing out, and we'll be testing complete redesigns. And sometimes it will be something as small as like, this social proof is missing. You're saying this, prove it to me. And here is this testimonial that we collected. And if we put this in here, it will be amazing. So it's really using the research to inform ourselves, and then also amplify and make them better and test those things. It's just the research really infuses everything that we do.
Yeah, it's funny, where we are now as a company, we just went through something similar, and someone ran a bunch of customer research for us on the quest to work on a strategic narrative. And it's funny seeing how many of our assumptions were wrong as well. Like, you assume things. And I had this more at a tech company. So I mostly worked in B2B SaaS. Now I'm in services. At SaaS companies, so frequently our head developer, our CEO would think, this is the feature, this is the thing everyone loves. Then you talk to customers, they don't care at all. They like this little niche thing because it solves this problem and actually has an impact on their life. So I'd imagine you discover that quite a bit as well, where there's a decent pivot of, you're completely wrong, let's rip this out and start.
And I think sometimes it's a pivot, and sometimes it's smaller than that, because you work with companies and they have quite a good idea of who their ICP is, but it's what you're saying. Or it's, you mentioned like a feature. Oh, the CEO thinks this is the feature, right? But then you go and you talk to customers and like, no, actually it's this. Now they're not mentioning a feature, because I'm not asking like, hey, what's your favorite feature? I'm asking about, if I took this product away from you today, what would be the biggest thing you'll miss? What is the problem that you won't be able to solve anymore? So then I use that. I'm like, oh, what they really want is to solve this problem. So now every feature that I mentioned, even the one that CEO is so obsessed about, will be under that umbrella of it solves this problem for you. So it's a lot of the time, it's not like this complete shift and change in narrative. It's just highlighting the things they really care about and making sure they understand why these features support solving these problems for them.
Yeah, so that makes a lot of sense. I think the thing I've struggled with a lot, so I've redone a lot of websites over my years in marketing. And the thing I've struggled with also is two things, actually. So unpacking what to say. So there's pieces and ingredients that you mentioned, and balancing that with repetition and depth. So there's this weird combination of you have to repeat the same high level message because people need to know. It's like brand recognition, almost like, what does Pepsi stand for? I know it's not a B2B example, but there's that piece where you have to drill the message home. But there's also some nuance occasionally you have to unpack on secondary pages or tertiary pages down the road. There's probably not an easy answer for this. I don't even know what the question completely is, honestly, but curious how you think through solving that, like balancing the repetition with the unpacking and stepping down that you need to do.
That is a good question. I think ultimately one of the first things that we do is step back and look at the whole journey of where people are going. Because if we treat individual pages as individual pages, then we can repeat ourselves a lot. And sometimes we need to. But if we're looking at the whole customer journey and we know that, and this is a lot of what our data analysts do, right? They'll say the best customer journey for our ICP is they go from this page to that page, then they download this, and then they'll get an email, and then they'll sign up for this. Or then they'll come in back into the start a free trial, then they'll bounce up. Like we'll look at what is the best customer journey for our ICP, and then we'll deal with that first. We'll thread the needle and we'll tell that customer story and the whole story for the product throughout that customer journey. And then you have the individual pages that aren't necessarily a big part of the funnel, but they still exist. So I think it's always just the part of stepping back. And I see this a lot with B2B companies, especially with complicated, like cybersecurity is a big thing that we do, and identity protection. Like we work with quite a few of these companies. And a lot of it is like repetition, but also using very complex words because we think we're talking to like very technical people. And you're burying the lead. So you're just saying very complicated words, or you're using a lot of sentences to say something very simple. And I think that happens when you're focusing on individual pages versus when you're looking at the entire customer journey.
Yeah, I like the cybersecurity example because we do a lot in that space as well. As someone who has to look at the website pages, I have to do it to research our own customers because we have a lot. Or if I have a net new call with one, I don't know what they do 90% of the time. And I know I'm not the target buyer. I'm not a CISO. I'm not a CTO. That being said, there's just so much there still that wish there was a nice, clean way to say it. I'm sure the odd CTO is thinking the same thing. Yeah. Complexity on the homepage, I think, can be a big struggle there. I have two more questions actually I want to get into. One of them is you mentioned emotion and you mentioned who are you actually writing for? Who's the person? Kind of the flip side of that, do you do work or help out with more like the brand personality and tone and voice, and then how you match that? And how do those two kind of interact?
So a lot of the times when we start writing, we've done our research, we have this hypothesis of who we're speaking to and what we need to say to them. And then we start A/B testing. And a lot of it is sometimes like a complete new landing page or a redesign for a comparison page, which is crucial for B2B. And what we find that happens is a lot of the times the company itself will reach out and say, hey, we have salespeople that actually have trouble answering these questions, or we need some battle cards, or we need to get a better understanding of how to respond to this. So what we find is that our research actually a lot of the time gets spread throughout the organization to like product or customer success or sales, and they start using that. And we obviously work with the existing brand and the tone and the voice, and we weave that in. But what we do is we're using conversion copy because we have conversion copywriters. So they're taking like the big kind of brand ideas and missions and that are usually very vague, and they bring them down into, okay, here's what's going to happen and here's how it's going to work. So our research has been very helpful for many of these B2B brands to leverage throughout. We write them to increase conversions, to gain more free trials for them, to get more paid subscribers or paid customers. But ultimately, a lot of the time, different teams in the organization end up using it alongside a messaging doc or a branding doc or positioning doc. And that it just helps it, because I think a lot of the time you get this branding PDF that someone like said, oh, use these colors and these are our strong words, but it isn't actionable. It's just like vague. So I think that's where conversion copywriting, when we do it for our clients, it becomes more actionable. You can actually use it with the design, because obviously we're also designing stuff. And then we're like, okay, first the message, then add design to amplify the message. And here's a wireframe and here's how that would look. And let's test it. So I think it all works together.
Yeah, and I think also the research you do is probably very different from a lot of companies do product research, right? They'll have a product marketing person. That is not the same type of research whatsoever. So whereas what you're doing, like you said, if I took the product away, what would you do? What would your life be like? How would you feel? It's a lot different than a product marketing person talking about a feature. So one thing I want to wrap this up on, because I'm sure you have an interesting story here, no pressure, is you mentioned there was, I think you said 223 emotions or something like that. It was a really high number. Curious of any that kind of surprised you, like where you went into a project and then the actual research brought in something where you did not expect it at all.
I think ultimately it's in B2B, it's always, I've been on this journey for years with B2B, and I'm writing a book about emotion in B2B. Because everyone's like, emotion in B2B, that doesn't make sense, which is hilarious to us because we get that. But I think I love seeing the reactions more than it's never going to be jealousy. And that's what I'm going to use in B2B, right? That's not the thing. We have found like a really interesting one. We worked with a Q&A software, QA software, not Q&A, QA software. So it's for QA people, individuals that work in a company. And when we interviewed them, one thing was really interesting that kept coming up was they felt like no one respected them. And people just wanted to like ship stuff and didn't care about QA. And they felt like left out from the whole process. So a lot of the stuff that we started testing, not just in messaging, also in design, like the visuals that we were choosing or how we even created navigation or the mobile journey, and the emails, everything was around you becoming a core part of the company, that you matter. Now that's a funny thing to think about in B2B, like you matter, you are important. Now you don't use those words, but that emotion of like neglect, the emotion of people don't respect me, that's like a core feeling that people have. And in order, like essentially what we ended up doing is saying like, this product is going to help you become core part of the team, and everyone will have to go through this product in order to launch this stuff, and your opinion will be valued and your time will be respected. And that to me was a thing, because ultimately it's, I don't feel significant, and that's crazy when you think, if you take like a big step back. But I get it, because when you work at a big company, sometimes you feel like you're just a tiny screw, or you're not really. So yeah, I think in B2B in general, when you mention like, these are the emotions that your prospects are feeling, and everyone's like, oh, that's weird or surprising, I didn't know that, or wow, that's a really interesting angle.
Yeah, that's a good one. Actually, I've worked at companies with QA teams, and I would have never thought that. But when you explain it, I'm like, yeah, that actually makes sense. Like you check for bugs. It's funny because it's actually important, because without the QA team, your product is going to suck. But it's just spot these bugs and get this thing out the door approach. So that's super interesting. The one last thing too, we didn't touch on, I don't think we have time or need to dive into, because I've talked it to death and everyone has, but what this really highlighted is AI can't really do any of this. So
Yeah.
everyone thinks like AI is going to wipe us all out. I've had people argue both ways on the podcast. And I think it depends on your role a little bit.
Yeah.
But for this stuff, I think actually nailing the emotional side will help you stand out because everyone else is going to be doing the AI approach.
Yeah. I just got back from MozCon, as I mentioned, which is like a huge SEO event. I think like 70% of the talks were about AI. And it was either like, oh my God, AI is coming for you, or don't worry about AI, it will be fine, that makes sense. Here's my take on it. And again, like everyone's been talked to death, but AI right now, at least, is as good as what you feed it. So if whatever you put in, that's what you're going to get. It's a junior copywriter. It's a junior assistant, a repository that spits things back at you. But if you go in and say, this is my ICP, and you're putting in behavioral data and you're putting in information, no one's going to go out and do that survey for you. AI isn't going to do a real interview face-to-face for 10 minutes with someone and ask them the real questions that help you understand the nuance. So it's great once you feed in all the information you have and the real important information. So I think it's just about remembering that strategy and customer first approach is where you can be, and it's what elevates you and puts you in a spot where AI is not going to, take over that stuff. It's just going to help you become even better at it.
Yeah, no, I think that's a good way to put it. I think Descript, it's like an editing platform we used to edit this podcast. They launched an AI feature and called it the AI Underlord instead of the Overlord. And I'm like, that's brilliant. That's the best way I've seen to summarize where this is. Like, it's an Underlord assistant that is going to help, but yeah, it's not coming for us. SEO though, I don't know. I could see why a lot of the talks are about it. They might be in a little bit of trouble. But Talia, thank you so much for taking the time to chat about this. I learned a lot about how to use motion, conversion copywriting, and all that. So if people want to learn more, check out your book. Once you're done any of that stuff, where should they go?
Definitely the website. There's loads of guides and articles, and then on LinkedIn for sure.
Perfect. So I'll include those links. Again, thanks for joining me. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks for listening to this episode. My key takeaway is just that you really need to do in-depth research to understand which emotions to utilize in your conversion copy. So you see all these best practices articles and about urgency and FOMO, but this one-size-fits-all approach doesn't really work. So do the research, put in the work, figure out the emotions, and then tell your story. If you enjoyed this episode, head on over to Apple Podcasts or Spotify or wherever you listen to your podcasts. Hit subscribe, leave us a review. It's always appreciated, and I'll be back next Tuesday with a new episode.